Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. So let's take a moment and go backwards in time. Let's go back to when I was 8 years old. I'm sitting in the dining room at my grandparents' dining table. My granddad is there, my grandmother, my dad, and my brother. Well, as an 8-year-old, I've just learned a new phrase that I absolutely love to use. And that phrase is, "That's a bunch of baloney." Well, my grandfather, being the person that he is, he understood that I love to use this particular phrase, and he was giving me every opportunity that he could think of to allow me to use this phrase. So every time he would say something that I found a little bit ridiculous, I would respond with, "That's a bunch of baloney." Well, this went on for the entire breakfast. I probably said this phrase a dozen times. Afterwards, after breakfast is over, I'm actually laying on the floor in the dining room playing with the toy. My grandfather comes walking up to me. He stoops down and dangles a slice of bologna in front of my face. I look at him dumbfounded. I was like, "What are you doing?" And he just responds with simply, "Well, you talked about it so much at breakfast, I thought maybe you wanted a slice." This was my grandfather's humor. And this is a big reason why I loved spending time with him, because it was always entertaining. And I always learned something new. In this particular instance, I learned the value of humor. There's always a time to laugh, and there's always something you can find out that's funny. And I learned a lot of different things from him. If you go forward a couple of years, one of my brother and I's favorite pastimes was going over to my grandparents' house during the summer. A lot of times, this actually ended up with my brother outside mowing his grass, and I wanted to go out and help as well. Well, my grandfather only had one lawnmower, so my brother got to mow, and then I got to do other odd jobs. Well, one of my grandfather's favorite tasks for me was to give me a rake and have me rake up twigs that were laying out in the yard. After I would get done raking, he would come walking over, and he would simply say, "Are you done?" And I said, "Yeah, I finished this area of the yard." Then he would casually point to a stick that's laying on the grass and go, "Are you sure? You missed one." And I'd have to go out there and rake that up. Well, with this particular memory, there was a couple of different lessons that I learned from it. First one was the value of hard work. If you work hard, you can get something done quickly, you can move on to something else, but also attention to detail. If you are aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it, you can do it correctly and completely and not have to come back and redo something. A couple of lessons that come in or that are very important for all of us in our everyday lives. Now, let's go back a little bit. I'm about 6 years old at this point, and I'm just learning how to read a clock face. At the same time, I've gotten a digital watch, and every time my grandfather would ask me what time it is, I would pick up my watch and go, "Well, it's 2:53. And for whatever reason, my grandfather was concerned that I didn't actually, every time I read this watch, I said the digital or the analog display, but I didn't know how to read a clock. I think he realized that I probably didn't know this. So he took it upon himself to teach me how to read a clock. Well, not only did he show me how to understand that when the hands are positioned in specific ways that it might be 2:10, he also taught me how to look at that and translate it into a slightly different format. So 2:10 can also be relayed as 10 minutes after 2. 3:15 could be a quarter after. 3:45 could be a quarter till 4. And at the time he was doing this, I didn't really understand why he was showing it to me, but I thought it was really cool because none of my friends actually utilized this style of saying time. And so I used it all the time. And it actually turned into a bit of a game with my grandfather, and it was very much a moment of quality time for me, because for the longest time, whenever I would go over to my grandfather's house, I would ask him, "What time is it?" And he would simply say, "I don't know." And he would show me his watch and say, "You tell me." So I would read off the time to him. Well, there's a couple of different lessons with this one. The first one, obviously, is how to read a clock, something that can be very useful. And it was also the value of quality time. I got to really get to spend time with my grandfather. It was something that I got to do with him that was only me and him. It wasn't something that my brother could participate because it wasn't a lesson that my grandfather taught him. Well, it wasn't until a lot of years later that I realized there was another lesson in this too. And that one is the value of being able to understand when two people are talking, they're saying things differently, but they might be saying the same thing. And understanding the value of perspective and just really how to interpret and how to see that you're talking about different things, but you're saying this, or you're talking about the same thing, but saying something different. It's a skill that's become very useful in my life today, especially in the job that I am, where I'm working with people trying to figure out what they're saying and trying to translate that into something that makes sense to everybody. So I got to spend a lot of time with my grandfather. Spent a lot of time over a lot of years, and got to just learn lots of different things. And I've found now that I'm actually in the same situation that he was back then, because for him, he was able to teach and to mentor me and teach me different lessons. Well, now that I'm a father, I have a 10-month-old at home. I'm in his shoes. I get to teach and get to show my daughter all these different lessons. And they are lessons that I find are very important, and I think that she will find to be very important later on too. So I just want to be able to provide that particular, I want to be able to teach my daughter all of those lessons that my grandfather taught me. So just to leave you with a thought, the next time you're hanging out with somebody that's a little bit younger than you, be aware that they might be watching you and learning, and they might be teaching others the same lessons that you're teaching them. Thank you.